Welcome, everybody, to Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker back at you with another interactive class out of the secret library of the Connected Universe. We have not been live here for a couple of weeks. We did do an upload last week, so I hope you enjoyed that. That was out of the archive, something that had not been previously public. Tonight, we're going to be talking about mysteries and secrets of Antarctica. A lot of interesting things going on near the South Pole. A couple things I want to talk about here before we dive headlong into that. First of all, if you are listening to the podcast version of this later, please, by all means, come out here almost every Wednesday night, live, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. We have a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes here at the Connected Universe. Of course, we have the secret library, so many videos, so much content that is back there. You get the live weekly class, the after show. We're going to have some special stuff in the after show this evening. And then we've got the monthly Q&A videos. So for those that are members, that are travelers, time travelers of the Connected Universe portal, get your monthly questions in so we can take care of that before the end of August here. We've got the Mike Morning Bug videos. We've got the all the Egypt and Ireland and America Southwest concert. We're gonna have Germany here soon, coming in April, if you could believe that. Which reminds me, we do have the Germany tour coming up in April, so join us for that. You can get all that information: the Germany tour, we've got the Connecting the Universe exclusive masterclass coming up here in Rahway, New Jersey in November. MikeRicksecker.com. Check out the events and tours page for that. So much going on there. But, oh my gosh. Really want to throw a shout out there to Brad and Tim, Tara, and all those who helped to run the Michigan Paracon. 14 years, 15, there was a COVID year in there, but Michigan Paracon 14 just happened here this past weekend, and it's the last one. That's it. They're done. Won't get into all the reasons as to why that's happening, but this was the biggest and one of the best Paracons out there. When we're talking paranormal conferences, insanely good. They were always a class act, put together such an amazing show. Start on Thursday. They would have like the pre-party on Wednesday. We'd get it ramped up on Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday were so immense, and just their organization, the way they put it together, such class act, and really gonna miss that. So Brad is involved with the Missouri Paracon coming up here in very end of February 28th to March 1st. That's in Kansas City, Missouri. Check that out. I also have the links there on my website, MikeRicksecker.com, in the events and tours section. So check that out as well. So I just wanted to really thank them for having me out there for several years now. It's been amazing. So many people that I've met there, connections made, friendships made, and getting the opportunity to speak in front of some very large audiences has been absolutely amazing. So I'm truly going to miss that event. Um, and going up there to the Sioux at that time of year has always been absolutely fantastic. I mean, last year we went to Mackinac Island, and Jen and I had an absolutely wonderful time there. It was always a bucket list item of mine to get there, and going all the way up there to the Sioux afforded us an opportunity to do that. So, in any case, without further ado, let's get into our topic for this evening, which is mysteries and secrets of Antarctica. There's a lot of wonderful, amazing, crazy things that happen down there at our South Pole. Have a few shout outs here real quick. Michelle Brandenburg, thanks for joining us tonight. There's Tom McNicholas is in the house. Of course, Jen is literally right across the room, right over there. Jason Thompson's in the house. Hello from Atlanta. Yeah, the Haunt Atlanta event has been pushed off until, what is this? I lost my internet connection? Really? Oh my gosh. Okay, we'll try this again. That is the side view. Did it lose my camera? Sorry, everybody. We'll try this again. Talking with Jen a little bit earlier, if you can actually hear me. There we go. So I get a new computer about every 4 years. Um, spent 30 years, over 30 years in the IT industry, and that's gonna blink. I'm gonna have to reset this. Oh my gosh. Sorry. So it's been about 30 years in the IT industry, and it's about every 4 years you actually want to switch out the computer. You can drag a computer along, but for everything that I do, it's really about every 4 years, and this computer will be 4 years old come September. So I apologize for there we go. Okay. We're back. And thank you, Jen, for telling them to hold. Insane. So basically, this computer's coming up to 4 years old, and so I'm actually looking at maybe going to a Mac. We'll see. So yeah, there's Jason from Atlanta. Atlanta has been pushed off until March, middle of March. So be on the lookout for that. It's another one, events and tours page. For the YouTube viewers, I have the links down there in the description. Rodrigo Vieira from Portugal. Wonderful to see you down there again. Sage Sleuth is in the house. Fantastic. All right. So without further ado, let's get into Antarctica, one of the most desolate places on this planet. Let's take a look at it here. A nice scenic photo here. But Antarctica, really, we're talking, this is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. It's covered in ice and glaciers that are literally miles thick. Miles. The winds are absolutely brutal, with windstorms sometimes lasting for days. You see some of these videos from there, the wind is just whipping around. And it's not just like here where you might get that for an hour or two or something like that. No, it goes on for days. And Antarctica is literally a desert. It's the driest continent on the entire planet. But a lot of strange activity that occurs here that we're going to get into some of this evening when we're talking UFO sightings, interests to underground civilization, survival stories that defy the odds, all kinds of crazy things that occur down in Antarctica. And you know what? I'm not even getting into the Anita Project this evening. I talk about that a lot, and that's that project, Anita Project, Ice Cube Project, during the 20 teens, which they're looking for neutrinos coming from space, and they were discovering the neutrinos coming up out of the Earth's surface there in Antarctica without a source. And the scientists themselves, the scientists said this was indicative of a parallel universe running in reverse time. They published a peer-reviewed scientific paper on this. There you go. That's not me. That's the scientist. That's not crazy metaphysical woo-woo. That's science. We're not even getting into that this evening. I've covered it a lot, and I've covered it in Travels Through Time and other works that I've done. So keep in mind, though, that when we are talking Antarctica, it's the southernmost part of our planet, the South Pole, and this is one of Ivan T. Sanderson's vile vortices. Covered vile vortices here as well. There are 12 locations when it comes to his vile vortices on the planet. 10 of them, 5 are on the Tropic of Cancer, 5 of them are on the Tropic of Capricorn. One is the North Pole, one is the South Pole. So this is one of those vile vortices of Ivan T. Sanderson, which really comes down to Earth energy that you have a molten ball of iron that's spinning around and around and around, creating a magnetic field. And as it passes through the Earth's surface, creates different, uh, depending on what it runs into, different metals, minerals, those sorts of things, creates more localized magnetic fields. But these are precisely placed, the vile vortices precisely placed around the globe, and they end up creating a icosagon, which is a 20-sided polygon. We're not really even getting into that this evening either. And that's all stuff that I talk about all the time. Where we're going to start here, we're going to start off, since we're talking mysteries and secrets of Antarctica, we're going to start with Admiral Richard E. Byrd. And this is one of the more significant, colorful stories that come out of Antarctica. Now, Admiral Richard Byrd, he was a famed aviator, first became known as the first to fly over the North Pole in 1926. But he became even more well-known after he conducted multiple expeditions to Antarctica, including, of course, the largest ever in Operation High Jump. Here's a photo from there. His expeditions really helped in mapping Antarctica. He was the first to fly over the South Pole, and he set up meteorological stations so we could learn more about the harsh environment there. Now, he was there 5 times. He kept going back and back and back. And when he was asked, well, why do you keep going back to Antarctica? And he simply said, I love it there. I love Antarctica. So anytime I'm called to go, I will go. So he went 5 different times. Now with Operation High Jump, which was the largest expedition ever to Antarctica. And you think of now, you have anywhere, depending on the season, 1 to 5,000 people there during their winter, which is our northern hemisphere summer. Southern hemisphere, their winter is during our summer. They might have around 1,000 people there now. During their summer, they might have about up to 5,000 people, and most of those are all scientific teams right now. And there's some administration, there's some support, those sorts of things going on. There's some military. But back in the day, nobody was hanging out in Antarctica. Nobody was staying there. We'll get into some more of that here in a little bit. But with Operation High Jump, this was 1940s, just after World War II. And this was 13 ships, 25 aircraft, and over 4,700 military personnel. This is all in one shot going there. In this particular operation, mapped about 75% of Antarctica's coastline and photographed over 500,000 miles of the continent. And the intent, of course, was to discover potential strategic areas to build military bases, as well as to train personnel and test equipment in frigid conditions. So, of course, there was a military aspect to this. So when we look at like the ships here, it's a military ship. We've got all kinds of equipment and things like this. And of course, just coming out of World War II, we got the military industrial complex revving up. What are we doing? We're going to these different locations. We're building bases and we're setting up operations so that we can establish a military presence. We did that all over the world. Antarctica was no exception. We were going to control that. And so Admiral Byrd helped set that up because he'd already previously been there, setting up. And their camps are called Little America. Yes, we're already establishing in America there in Antarctica. So kind of always got a kick out of that name. Now, again, he was the first to fly over the South Pole, first to fly over the North Pole, which over the years kind of became kind of controversial. Some say that he never actually made it to the North Pole and that he actually turned around before he got there. I'm not going to get into that debate, but he definitely was the first to fly over the South Pole. There is a story here that we're going to get into with Admiral Byrd that is highly controversial. So, after he passed away, his son came across his personal journal. And within that was a very, very interesting story that you guys remember this is his own personal journey. He was a highly decorated member of the military. And he told this fascinating story about how he was flying near the South Pole and discovered a deep entrance into the earth. It was like a cave that went into the ground. And as he was flying through this cave, it was large enough for his plane to fly into. The cavern turned lush and green and led to a shimmering rainbow city that looked like it was made of crystal. Now, as he was flying toward this city of crystal, there were these disc-shaped objects that surrounded him, and they somehow took remote control of his airplane. And as they had this remote control of his airplane, they lowered him down to the ground. He got out, and they led him to this large cavernous area. I guess it was kind of off to the side of this shimmering city. And there he met the quote unquote master. And he's talking with the master. And basically, this guy told him that their civilization down there under Antarctica was very, very disappointed in the humans up on the surface for their nuclear program, and they were launching nuclear weapons, and basically Hiroshima, Nagasaki, that sort of thing. Of course, they were amping up their arsenal at that point. They're very, very disappointed in the humans for that. Again, it's a really, really fantastic story. We'll have to keep in mind here, this was his personal journal. This guy is a Medal of Honor recipient, so he's highly decorated. And of course, he's not going to share this publicly, but he was told not to publicly. There's also another entry in the journal that in March, he had a meeting at the Pentagon. And within this meeting, basically it's a debriefing of what happened and what occurred there down in Antarctica. And of course, he relates the story. And he was told not to talk about it publicly, in the interest of national security and for the sake of humanity and these sorts of things. So he kept quiet on that, but he did have these things noted in his journal. So, it's a fantastic story, and there are a lot of skeptics that are like, you're crazy and that sort of thing. Again, his son finds it after he passed, and eventually becomes public knowledge. Now, there's a couple of different things to look at here when it comes to this. So, those that believe in Hollow Earth point to this and say, "See, there's a civilization that lives in the." Now, I posted this, so I had my blog for those of you that are subscribing to the blog, and for those that don't, connecteduniverse.substack.com. I have 2 articles that I've posted here recently. So Stargates in Antarctica, and then Atlantis in Antarctica. Those 2 concepts. So I included this story in the Stargates, and I state very clearly in there, I'm not a Hollow Earth guy. Okay, the classic Hollow Earth idea is that there's these massive holes at the North Pole and the South Pole, and you just basically fly into there, like Byrd did, and it opens up to this great, huge inner Earth that has its own sun. There's these other civilizations that are huge cities and things like this. I'm not on board with all that. There's a cross, there's a mantle, there's the different layers. Okay. However, within there, and my co-host Victoria Monday on Edge of the Rabbit Hole uses the term hallowed Earth. I really don't even use that, but that type of term makes sense. Hallowed Earth, in the sense that there are great cavernous areas within the Earth's crust. The mantle is going to be too hot, but within the Earth's crust, old magma chambers, large lava tubes, these sorts of things. Even if you go out to like a place like Mount Shasta, and you see some videos of people that are walking through these magma tubes, they're huge. They're absolutely huge. Or the lava tubes, they're absolutely massive. And those are just the tubes that the magma will float. Now you think of like a magma chamber from an extinct volcano or something like that. I mean, it's going to be even much more massive. So there is absolutely, I will concede that yes, there could absolutely be large areas under the earth in which civilizations could live under there, some other life forms, whether they're humanoid in nature or not. I mean, even we've seen throughout our history and even our today, our government and military uses massive areas underground. So it's absolutely possible that yes, there could be some sort of civilization living underground. Now, I do postulate in that one particular article, or did Admiral Byrd pass through some sort of portal or Stargate as he was flying through that, or did they open it up for him? Did they designate, hey, this is a highly respectable guy within the American military. We'll bring him in, have him deliver the message for us, and then close up the Stargate once he left. I did postulate that within the article. So it's a possibility. I mean, these sorts of things are on the table. We'll get to another point here in just a moment on the lush green vegetation that he saw within the tunnel as he flew in. But see, a lot of comments are coming in. So let's take a look at some of these. Hey, I see Jack McCarthy's in the house. Great to see you, buddy. Hope everything's going well there at TA. Let me kind of scroll up here, see if you guys have any questions or comments. Looks like a lot of you guys are just chatting down there, which is absolutely fantastic. Pandora Farms is in the house. So there's Lisa. Wonderful to see you as well. All right. And Michelle saying, I completely believe in this. Wonderful. And Tom, Jules Verne stuff. Yeah. Journey to the Center of the Earth, that sort of thing. I mean, yeah, it's, again, I don't believe, because when you look at that illustration, and I didn't even provide it here, I was going to and kind of forgot. You look at it, it almost looks like a pair of parentheses around a big giant sun. And it's like, how would that even work? So it's not that sort of thing as quote unquote hollow, but the idea that you can go to deeper places in the earth and there are things that are down there, it's conceivable, it's possible. And so, of course, people would ask, well, wait a minute. We're talking Antarctica, extreme cold. How in the world would vegetation within this tunnel even grow? Well, there's a couple different things here about Antarctica. For one, we know that there's an ancient jungle there. When we've done ice core samples, we have revealed that at some point in time, that Antarctica was at a different place on the globe and was home to an ancient jungle. We've pulled up ancient tree stumps, ancient vegetation, these sorts of things that have shown us that. So there was an ancient jungle there. The heat to be able to create something like this, well, all we really have to do is, there's Cody. Cody just jumped into the chat here. Great to see you there, Cody. So all we have to do is look at Lake Vostok. So this is a Russian drilling operation. And here's the actual drill site. So what they've been doing here for like 20 years is trying to drill into this. It's not a frozen lake. Now, there's 2.5 miles worth of ice. But underneath that is a massive, you can't say underground, It's under ice. It's a massive under ice lake that's about the size of Lake Ontario, but has far, far more volume. It's like 4 times the volume because it's much, much deeper than Lake Ontario. So, like, the size of it, width, length, that sort of thing, it's about the size of Lake Ontario, but the depth is much, much deeper. So it has like 4 times the volume of liquid water, which means that there is a subterranean underground heat source. So, like geothermal venting or something like this, that is warming up the water there. And that tells us that there underneath Antarctica is some sort of heat source, which, I mean, we see this all over the world. We see geothermal venting all over the place. You have underwater volcanoes. You have near some of these vents. Our technology has only really just been able to get down to some of these, and they're finding new species and new life forms all the time. So when they've done the drilling, of course, they're looking for whatever life forms that they can, and they have found like new bacterias and things like this that we weren't familiar with before. But this whole thing is all enclosed. It's its own little what's the word I'm looking for here? It's its own little ecosystem that's under there. We don't know what other life forms may be under there because the drill hole is only about 5.5 inches wide. So it's not like they're ice fishing and trying to, they're not bringing up other life forms and things like that. They're only able to test the water. But this tells us that there are heat sources there under Antarctica. So if Admiral Byrd really did fly into a tunnel to this shimmering city, the vegetation that he saw could be possible, having the heat from these subterranean heat sources, this geothermal venting or whatever. And then you'd still have natural sunlight and things like that coming in. So that puts on the table that this is actually possible. Again, he's the only one that has ever reported this sort of story, but he was a highly decorated member of the military. So until we get back down there, however, to get to the South Pole, we've heard some interesting stories come out of there about restricted airspace. You're only allowed to fly over certain areas around there. People that have flown over restricted airspace were detained afterward. Even if there was some sort of emergency and they had to fly over that restricted airspace because of it, they were detained and questioned and things like this afterward. I worked for NSA for a few years. I kind of understand how that system works. But people are coming out of there reporting these sorts of things. So this brings us to UFO sightings that have occurred down there in Antarctica, which have been several. People have reported when they have breached that airspace, seeing activity that is not normal, that might even be extraterrestrial in nature. The story that I've talked about a lot when it comes to this, I've been on Ancient Aliens and things like that, and they've talked about that, breaching the restricted airspace. But that's more modern times. Back in the 1950s, there was a guy named Albert K. Bender. Now, Bender, he headed up the International Flying Saucer Bureau in 1952. It was a brand new organization. It was a big UFO flap that year. And he started, well, you can see it here. He started a journal called Space Review. And he really wanted to cover this topic and try to get to the heart of, okay, what is actually going on here? And he blew this organization up big within a year. It was international. Had an office in the UK, had an office in Australia. Remember, this is during a time there's no internet to make long distance calls. are very expensive. You had to do that after 9, or you're going to get charged extra. For those that are as old as me or older, we remember these things. The call overseas was going to be even more expensive. So most of this was done snail mail, writing letters and things like this. What a novel idea. In a year's time, he blows his organization up big, and then all of a sudden, he cuts the whole thing off, says, I'm done, I'm out, closes up shop. Space Review is done. International Flying Saucer Bureau, done in 1953. And there's a number of rumors, speculation, a lot of these things over the years as to what exactly happened. What happened to Bender? People thought maybe the Men in Black got to him. Well, in the early 1960s, he wrote a book called Flying Saucers and the Three Men. I actually have it on the bookcase over there. And he talked about what happened. He did reveal, yes, it was the Men in Black, but not in the way that we really think of the Men in Black. So he told this fascinating story about how one day he comes home. He goes up to his room, and there standing in his bedroom are these 3 hat-wearing, dark, shadowy beings with glowing eyes that smell of sulfur. And they tell him, stop. We don't want you working on the UFO research anymore. Done. Apparently, he was getting a little bit too close to the truth. And basically what they told him was that they were on a 15-year mission. They were in the middle of this 15-year mission to harvest resources from Antarctica. And they didn't want him speaking about this at all. Of course, they threatened him and all that fun stuff. They didn't want him threatening this stuff at all, or talking about this at all, until their mission was done. And so when he published his book in the early 1960s, the 15-year mission had been completed. And so he revealed what he had been told. It's a fascinating book. But again, this was related to Antarctica, where they actually had a base that was established in Antarctica to harvest these resources from the earth and take those things to their home world. So we see a lot of really fascinating, interesting stories like this when it comes to UFOs, extraterrestrials, and what have you from Antarctica. Now, the question is, what exactly were these beings? Because when I first heard the story years ago, and I've been doing a lot of research on shadow people, for me, it was like, oh, this is the paranormal shadow person type of a story. Now, Albert K. Bender said they were extraterrestrials. They're from another planet. They were coming here to harvest resources. Other people hear the story and say, well, these are the Men in Black. Are we really talking about the same thing here? It's quite possible, or some relationship between it all. Having worked for NSA, the kind of the classic Men in Black government agent, these weren't government agents. But a lot of the Men in Black sightings can be these. Yeah, Jack, hit that like button, feed the algorithm, share it out is what you need to do. Appreciate that, my friend. And then Jack saying, I love the stories I've heard about Vostok. Don't know how credible are, but really cool nonetheless. Yeah, Vostok is, again, if you just kind of look at the diagram here, it's 2.5 miles worth of ice before you even get to this. Sorry, I had your comment over the top. Before you even get to the lake itself, which again is far deeper, although it's the same length and width as Lake Ontario, is far deeper. So this thing is absolutely massive, and there's some sort of geothermal venting under there to kind of heat this up. Something we'll learn a little bit more about as the years go on, but it's a challenge to get under there. And one of the concerns is, as they're drilling that far into the ice, is the de-icing that they have to do so they can keep the drill going. So the Russians at first were using kerosene, which of course would contaminate the lake. So that's something they're really concerned about. So we'll see what else comes out of that over the years. Okay, so why such this interest in Antarctica? There was it's a really terrible part of our 20th century history. We talked the Third Reich and the Nazis and that sort of thing. But we are going to cover them here because they do have a piece of the history here. Yeah, Adolf Hitler did send Nazis to Antarctica. Absolutely happened. The team was sent out in 1938, arrived there in January 1939. It was a secret Nazi research expedition. They established a presence there, and they called it Neuschwabenland, or New Swabia. And one of the goals, they had an honest goal, or at least one honest goal, I should say, which was to establish their own whaling industry to be able to harvest oil. Again, they're killing whales, but still, it's compared to everything else that they did, it's like this was more industrial in nature. Harvest oil off the whales so that they would no longer have to buy this type of oil off of the Norwegians. So they could set up their own operation there. However, this presence that they established there lasted for some time. Of course, we know that they went to Argentina and elsewhere up into South America. We find these Nazi ruins and things like this in South America. But this connection between Antarctica, Argentina, this sort of thing, this is almost like a trade route, sort of, and established that between Antarctica and South America. So they essentially established a base there. And as they were establishing these bases in other parts of the world, we know that they were setting this up in South America to come up into North America. We've seen the plans. We've seen the documentation. We've seen where they were doling out parts of the United States to different superiors, people of influence within the Nazi party. Like New York was going to go to this person, be renamed to these different things, these different areas of the country. We've seen all that. That was the plan, which fortunately never came to fruition. Antarctica was a part of all of that. So there's this belief, as far as like a quote unquote official documentation, have any of our scientific research teams found caches and stores of Nazi weapons? Well, there's nothing official that's come out of that. However, we have seen, if they set something up on an ice shelf, we have seen where pieces of an ice shelf would break off and would basically take a camp and just float out into the ocean. Seriously, I'm not kidding. There was, it was in the 1960s. It was the USS Edisto, headed south to Antarctica, and they encountered this massive, huge, he said it was about the size of a sports stadium, of an iceberg, and sticking out the side of it was all this crazy, weird material. So they get closer and they're taking a look at it, and they notice that it's like a part of a building. They can see canvas, they can see wood, all this stuff coming out of it. It looks like some rooms and this sort of thing. So they're like, what the heck is this? It was some sort of camp. So they actually had a helicopter on board the ship. So they flew over there. They got on top of the iceberg, and there's like these poles sticking up, like telephone poles. They were never able to confirm which camp it was. With that particular one, they think it was Little America 3. So this would have been an older Admiral Byrd camp. And the thing that would have given it away was if they could find the massive snow crawler thing. But they couldn't find that the ice was too thick and all that to really, and they had to get going further south. So they let that float north as they went south. So that particular iceberg eventually would have broken up and melted and just would have dumped its secrets into the ocean. But that sort of thing happens. There may be that they may have happened to some, Nazi stores and warehouses and things like this if they would have built it on an ice pack. In any case, so yes, they could have been hiding weapons down there. We also know that Hitler spent massive amounts of resources during his reign on hunting down historic items and artifacts that he considered would have given the Third Reich more power. And I mean, the guy did his homework. I mean, he was nuts and he was crazy and all that. But he really did his homework when it came to research on, esoteric and powerful items. That's why he kept going to these different countries and stealing everything that they had, because he believed that the more that the Third Reich had, the more power it would give them. I mean, he had like these massive plans for museums and things like this that, I mean, you think, oh yeah, we're putting in a museum. Well, okay. So it's not like Indiana Jones. It belongs in the museum. He was stealing these things to put into their own facilities, believing that it was going to give the Third Reich more power. This could be the most prestigious, or some say prestigious. Which one? Prestigious or prestigious? Either or either. Yeah. Yeah. So in any case, he did his homework on this sort of things. He would have been familiar with the ancient maps that showed Antarctica, existing, not only existing, but being alive and having vegetation and having animals. Oh, now where did we go? Where did we go with this? Well, yes, we're going to the Piri Reis map. We're absolutely going there. But before we get there, I'm going to take a look at your comments because it looks like we have a number of comments coming in. Oh, Karen's in the house as well. Great to see you down there, Karen. Oh, and you did share it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That. Boom, shared. Awesome. Oh, Karen says, hoping to go to Antarctica in a couple of years, see the Empire penguins in the ice formation. So yeah, they are doing a lot of tours down there. Antarctica tourism has really, really picked up, which is really fascinating. And Joe is asking, here we go. Mike, do you think disclosure will happen in our lifetimes? So this is, in questioning the UFO sightings. So in a sense, we're seeing some of that play out. Here's the thing, is the government can no longer deny what's going on in our skies. We have, cell phones like this that they're taking HD or better photos and videos. I can do 4K on this one if I want. It takes up a lot of space if I do that, so I generally keep it HD unless I'm doing some sort of specific filming. But yeah, and they can no longer deny that these things are going on in our sky. It used to be that somebody would take a photograph and it would be blurry. You might see some light, balls of light, and be like, okay, that could be anything, right? But these days, not anymore. So since they can no longer deny it, they have to give us something. So they are admitting, yeah, there's something going on there that we can't explain. So we're going to have these congressional hearings. We'll have some quote unquote discussions, all this sort of stuff. They want to control the narrative. If we're going to admit that there's something going on, we're going to control what is being talked about in regards to that. So, so yes, Joe, sort of, we're not going to get the full truth until, the extraterrestrials in their spacecraft land on our lawn and say, hi, we're here and this is what's going on. Yeah, that's as far as that is going right now. Okay. So Perry Reese map. Yeah, I love this map. I'm a map guy. I love old maps. When I was a kid and we would be traveling really anywhere. A lot of times it was Massachusetts to Ohio because we had family in Ohio and we were living in Massachusetts. But I would sit there with the map when I wasn't like writing or reading. I'd be sitting there with the map and following along with, oh, we're coming up to the rest stop or coming up to this exit or whatever. But I love the old historic maps too. I've told the story before of being in downtown Baltimore with a map from like 1870 and trying to find the location of an old baseball ballpark. And we found the location, but we didn't know how to get out of there. And all we had was an 1870 map to get us going. That was like, probably around 2003 or something like that. In any case, so we see something like the Piri Reis map, and this is just like the bottom part of it. And so there's South America. You can kind of see the bottom tip of South America there, and then it wraps around, and that's Antarctica. And we actually see some illustrations of animals on there and things like this. So this comes from, what's the Piri Reis map? Well, it's from 1513 is when it was put together. And what we have, and that's just a smaller part of a third of the map that we actually have. And so Piri Reis was an Ottoman admiral and cartographer. And what he did is he collected all kinds of ancient maps of not only his era, but long beforehand. So 1513 map. Yes, he had maps that were supplied to him by Christopher Columbus when he made his voyages in 1492 and so forth. But he also had all these other ancient maps from earlier times, including, and this is his own writing, 8 Ptolemaic maps. Okay, what's a Ptolemaic map? So basically a map from the Ptolemy line of kings in ancient Egypt. So from the time that the Greeks took over in Egypt, when Alexander the Great came in, he put his buddy Ptolemy in charge, and all of his children and grandchildren and so forth ruled Egypt until the Romans took over. Cleopatra VII and Julius Caesar. And Cleopatra VII was the last of the Ptolemy line of kings. So that means that when we are looking at the Piri Reis map, we're looking at, in part, resources and information that would have come out of the Great Library of Alexandria. And that's a cool fact. That is kind of cool. You look at this, and just to know that some of this, and this, again, this is just a piece of it. This is the bottom half of this particular map. Part of this came from the Great Library of Alexandria. That is amazing to think about. So the ancients knew that Antarctica existed. There are some other maps that also, ancient maps that depict Antarctica. When we look at, these are both called the Orbis Terrarum. This is the Typus Orbis Terrarum 1570. And then this one from 1590. And they both show Antarctica, but they refer to it as Terra Australis or Terra Australis Incognita, which means unknown land of the south. So the term Antarctic was coined by Greek geographer Marinus of Tyre back in the 2nd century. But the Southern Territory Australis, we hear the term Australis, we think of Australia. Well, yeah, that basically is the southern continent, right? But it's also that term for what we now call Antarctica, this unknown land to the south. So they kind of adhered it to both of these lands, which is kind of interesting. But we see it here on these ancient maps. So this is where my idea of Atlantis in Antarctica comes into play. So we talked a little bit before about the Nazis. Um, we also have the Americans heavily got involved, of course. Oh, the Nazis were down there. What were they doing? Let's establish a military presence there. And then all of these other countries are getting involved. What in the world is so fascinating and interesting about Antarctica? Why are we spending so much time there in a land that is so desolate? Yes, we're trying to figure out different things about our planet for science and things like this. But there are also these hidden secrets down there. We know for a fact that the land mass of Antarctica was in a different spot on the planet. Again, indicative of the fact that we have found ancient jungles under there. Now, we could get into Charles Hapgood and Earth crust displacement and this sort of thing, which is a controversial topic. But he was also a scholar of these different maps. Hapgood himself was a university professor, highly educated, and he was looking at things like the Piri Reis map and others, trying to figure out what in the world was going on back then. That because our modern, quote unquote, modern explorers, we should say modern European explorers, discovered Antarctica in 1820. But it's kind of one of those where they knew something was down there. Kind of like even with Columbus, yeah, he sailed the ocean blue 1492 and just boom, let's go west into the unknown. Well, it wasn't so much unknown because we know that the Vikings had been there. There are even rumors now and even some interesting evidence is coming forth that the Portuguese had already previously been there. In fact, there's a city in Portugal that claims Christopher Columbus as their own, saying he wasn't Italian, he was Portuguese, and just happened to sail for. There's a lot of interesting stuff behind the scenes. So, him making that voyage, while yes, it was risky, he knew something was out there. So, kind of same with these other explorers that, quote unquote, discovered this in 1820. They knew something was down there. They weren't sure what because it had been so long, but there were ancient maps that had this on there. So here's the idea with Atlantis. You got to think about this. Atlanta was 11,600 years ago. And what frustrates me to no end is when people relate the age of Atlantis to Plato. Plato was around 400 BC. But that's not when Atlantis existed. And that it's this weird confusion of because I've seen so many articles and papers and stories and books and things like this on this particular topic. A recent article that I posted here a few weeks back where it was about a sunken city, a sunken Greek city, and they're trying to connect it to was this the inspiration for Plato sort of thing? And it's like, no, because this Atlantis city that Plato wrote about, again, he got the story from Solon, who was a couple hundred years before him. Solon visited Egypt in around 600 BC, and the Egyptian priests there said, this story that we're talking about took place 9,000 years ago. So that would be 9,600 BC. So 11,600 years ago puts us right at the end of the Younger Dryas era when the Earth's temperature greatly rose and things melted and things flooded. Yeah. So, which makes sense. So the idea of this Atlanteans, I get that's speculative, but Atlanteans visiting Antarctica, colonizing there, developing civilization. Did they leave technology behind that is now frozen under the ice? And you have to think about the type of technology that would have been left behind. When we're talking about, we still question today, how did they build some of these massive megalithic structures? There are many that believe that the pyramids are Atlantean constructions. And there are a lot of people that get ticked off. How are you taking away from The achievements of the ancient Egyptians. No, the ancient Egyptians did a lot of wonderful things, but you have to kind of realistically look at the way that dynastic Egyptians built things. They put hieroglyphs over everything. Everything. Now, there are some smaller pyramids that are there, like you go to Saqqara. You have the great big step pyramid. No hieroglyphs in there. None at all. There's a little tiny pyramid off to the side there. You go in, you look in, yeah, there are hieroglyphs inside. Well, I mean, they're mimicking the great big thing that's over here. Like, oh, that's huge, that's massive. I have no idea how to build that on that type of scale, but I can do a smaller one. And then again, they learn their stuff with hieroglyphs, as the dynastic Egyptians did. And so when we look at the Great Pyramid of Giza and the other couple of pyramids, there are no hieroglyphs. Somebody built those, but it wasn't the dynastic Egyptians, didn't have their stamp on it. So who built that? So that's where some people believe it was, a pre-existing culture, the Atlanteans perhaps. And we do know from the text that Plato has provided that the Atlantean civilization spread out. It did spread out as far as Egypt and into some other places in Europe, and then southward where? We don't know how far south. So that does become a bit of speculation, but there is this idea and this possibility that, yes, Atlanteans, they were a maritime civilization. They know how to control the seas. And they sailed down there and established civilization. They may have left some technology behind to be able to move these big blocks, to be able to do these sorts of things. So is that an anti-gravity technology there under the ice? Possibly. Again, speculative. But that's where we have to ask those questions. We absolutely have to ask those questions. Speaking of questions, let me get to your comments here. And I will say, because we've got a couple minutes left here and we got to wrap it up. For those that are members of the Connected Universe Portal, our time travelers, we're going to talk a little Ernest Shackleton here during the after show, because that story there is just, you want to talk about defying the odds. That story is completely wild. Tom, all right. If the ETs are here, they more than not want to assist in saving the planet. Who knows what government they're really working with? Scary to think about. Well, it's one of those, Tom, where, like humans, you have some that want to help. You have others that are completely selfish and only want to do things for themselves. So I say the same thing is going to be true of ETs. You're going to have some that are really nice and benevolent and all that, and others that are going to be mean, nasty, and nefarious. Just depends on which ones we are talking about. And then, of course, we have, here's the thing. If they're in our planet, living here alongside of us, they're not really extraterrestrials anymore, or maybe they never were, right? They could very well just be another indigenous life form to Earth living alongside of us. So it also make them an Earthling, just not a being that we're very public about. And here's Michelle here. Communicate with very loving extraterrestrials. I have encountered a negative one. Yeah, you'll have that. You will have both. It's kind of the nature of the universe. You'll have the yin and the yang. It's the hermetic principle, as above, so below. Duality, that sort of thing. You're going to have the two sides. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap up the public side for this. Really enjoy all of you hanging out with us this evening. For those listening to the podcast version of this later, connectuniverseportal.com. Every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Please join us. For those that are members, time travelers of the Connected Universe Portal, stay tuned. We're going to cover some Ernest Shackleton here in that amazing story of survival there in Antarctica. So for everybody else, until next time, time really exists.